Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wa salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm your brother Sajid Lipum, here again with my brother.
Yeah. Trying to talk to each other.
Actually, this is not a natural thing that I do. I don't sit there and I'm like, hey guys, what's up? It's me.
What's
like,
up?
that's not
Hey,
something
it's me
I
again.
do.
Hey.
I don't talk like
We
that.
should pretend.
Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wa salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm brother Sajid, and I'm here again with brother Omar Shatila. We have another top 10 tip video for you today, and this is very important for myself particularly. Inshallah, hopefully I will benefit from this. I'm going to try to keep these tips in mind. This is the top 10 tips for online interactions.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. My hope is that I would benefit as well as everyone else out there. I think when it comes to online interactions, a lot of times people lose focus on the reality of things because it's virtual, it's all online, it's not in person. So hopefully these tips would help us all stay grounded in our online interactions with other people.
So tip number 1, don't say anything online that you wouldn't say in person.
And you know, unfortunately, we see that a lot. You know, and even sometimes with people that I know myself, and they'd say something, post something online that this person would never say in person to anyone else. So you know, don't be fooled by the online that there's no one there. That you're just talking to the screen or typing it up. You
forget that you're actually interacting with other human beings.
Stop and think for yourself. Is that something I would say in person? If I ever see that person or run into them, would I ever say that? Or as someone in my community, my neighbor, my friend, a family member, would I say that thing to them in person? If not, then maybe you shouldn't be typing it online either.
And that's one of the problems with all of these anonymous accounts is that people, they don't even treat themselves like they're a real person, let alone other people. This is why I like actually having my name, having a picture of myself, who I am, rather than all these anonymous accounts of people who you don't know who they are, where they're from, their name, anything, and they just say some of the most off-the-wall crazy things, So one of the benefits of actually posting your real name and a picture of yourself is that I think you remember that you're a human being and you're interacting with other human beings, So.
And I think also when you're anonymous online, a lot of times, not everyone who's anonymous falls into that, but a lot of times people who are anonymous don't think twice about it because they think, well, no one knows who I am. But when it's known who you are, when you're posting it and it's going to tie directly back to who you are as a person in real life, people think twice about what they say or post online because, well, it's going to come back and impact their real life in person.
Yeah, for sure. So let's go straight to tip number 2. Be careful what you post online as it's public.
People don't, sometimes it seems like they don't think that whatever they post online, even if they're just interacting with another person, but if it's public and you're posting it, imagine that you have the potential to reach millions with what you've posted, with what you've said. And be careful as well with the pictures you post, with things you say. You don't want to be a fitna for others. Sometimes people post pictures, whether, brothers or whether they're sisters, they're posting pictures of themselves and, not too, pictures that aren't too appropriate. And, you don't want to cause fitna for others, whether, even let's say the same gender as you or the opposite gender from you. A guy, you don't want to post a picture of yourself and be a fitna for women, or also be a fitna for men who are looking at you, comparing themselves to you, thinking that they're not as good, or they're not as beautiful, or they're not as handsome, things like that. When you post something, think about it. If you're sitting in at school or at work and someone comes and sits and stares at you, you might think it's creepy, but online when you post things, depending on what you're posting, imagine so many people having access to it. Imagine if they sit and stare at it. Would you be comfortable? If not, then maybe you shouldn't be, posting that specific picture online or that post. people might take your picture as well. Once you post something, it's online, it's public. People might take it and do other things with it without your permission, things that you never intended for it to be done.
Yeah, this is a big topic. I guess I should clarify, because before I said, if you post a picture of yourself, then it humanizes you more. It makes you realize that your face is attached to what you're saying. But we should also be careful, like you said, about being a fitna, especially for the opposite gender, because in Islam, there, of course, are rules regarding gender relations between men and women. And it definitely is a fitna, more so for men to see pictures of women than vice versa. But, it's both true. Both are true. But just the way that I've seen it actually play out online is there has been entire podcast episodes dedicated to, certain things that people have said about sisters from a particular ethnicity who are, they're reverting to Islam, and they're posting their pictures, and it's a fitna, all these women from, so I don't want to specifically out anyone or what happened, but, it is a fitna for men. And I remember that brother who posted it, he got a lot of backlash for it, but what he was saying is true. It's a reality. I mean, brothers, when they see pictures of sisters who, of course, they're going to be beautifying themselves by posting their pictures online. They don't want to look ugly, obviously, when they're posting their pictures, although there are different levels. I mean, some have the filters and the makeup and the everything, and then others, it might just be more of a passport-style photo, no makeup or whatever. But the bottom line is that brothers are going to be looking at your pictures. It's going to be a fitna for them. And there's no telling what they're going to do with these pictures, because I saw a Twitter conversation between one of these sisters. I don't know anything about her. I don't know how it even showed up on my timeline on Twitter. But basically, I think there's a sister who does hijabi tutorials and makeup maybe. And there was a Muslim brother saying that your picture, it's on this adult website. And I saw them going back and forth, and she was saying, well, I didn't put it there. Someone else took, the pictures that she puts up and put it on that website. So, that just sort of shows you the extent to which people are going to take the stuff that you post online and how creepy it can be. And, just something to really be aware of.
It's public. Everyone has access to it. So you don't have much control over it, how people use it and what they do with it. That reminds me, I've always thought that, it's a problem when it impacts marriage and relationships of husbands and wives. Mm-hmm. When people beautify themselves more, when they're taking a picture to post online, or when they're going out, they dress up, they beautify themselves more to other people than to their own spouse. Yeah. For both men and women, they dress up when they're going outside, but, at home they're in a, old smelly shirt, it impacts marriage, because that your spouse, they're going to go out and they're going to see everyone else's, husbands, wives, whatever. They're going to see them and, the dressed up and beautifying themselves. And then they go home and, and it's unfortunate, but we see that a lot, wives, they don't pay much attention at home beautifying themselves to their husband. When they're going out or going to an event or, whatever it may be, a wedding or whatever, they dress up and they beautify themselves and they wear makeup and this and that and they go. And same thing with the brothers. Sometimes they neglect themselves at home and then, they don't really beautify themselves for their wives, but then when they go out, they're all dressed up and smelling nice and looking fancy and sharp and all this. And they're being a fitna for other people, and they're not even fulfilling the rights of their spouse. And so that's definitely going to impact your spouse if, that's what you're doing. It's going to impact your spouse. And it's going to impact the spouses of other people as well.
Right. And I think that leads well into tip number 3. Interactions with the opposite gender should follow Islamic guidelines. So as we said, posting pictures of yourself, would you beautify yourself like that for a room full of men? And likewise, men posting pictures, with their shirts off and flexing and all these things. Would you do that in a room full of women? Because everyone is seeing these pictures that you're posting. It's your profile picture. That's how you're presenting yourself to the world. Keep in mind that the opposite gender is also looking at these pictures. Yeah. And we need to maintain Islamic guidelines. And another thing I think that goes along with that is all the interactions going on between brothers and sisters. This is something that I sort of had to realize myself after going through the transition of having a Facebook account before embracing Islam and having, all these different friends, boys, girls, Muslims, non-Muslims, men, women, all these different people, and then going through the marriage process and then realizing I need to do something about this. It's not appropriate for me to have all of these women. They're not, I'm not their mahram. I have no relation to them. Some of them aren't even Muslims. They're not wearing hijab. Even if they are wearing hijab, they're not dressed appropriately, the interaction. So, I reached a point where I deleted all of the women who are not part of my family from my online accounts, Facebook, Twitter, so on and so forth. So I think that's something that is underrated and overlooked is all of the interactions and, brothers following sisters and vice versa and interacting all the time. It's important to understand that the same Islamic guidelines apply online as offline.
And unfortunately, that double standard of online versus offline interaction leads to people going to two extremes. You often find people, when it comes to interacting with the opposite gender, they're on one extreme in person and on the other extreme online.
Yeah.
And it's just not a healthy way of interacting, in both scenarios.
Tip number 4, don't assume anything about someone you don't know anything about.
A lot of times when you don't, especially like someone doesn't have their actual name on their profile, you don't know who they are. They could be anyone, they could be, you don't know their background, you don't know what their beliefs are, you don't know who they are. They could be, a random person, living in a different, country they could be, a 10-year-old who's just messing with you. They could be a, 9-year-old person. You don't know who they are. You don't know anything about them, so don't assume anything. You don't know their background. You could have a scholar. You could have someone who's a layman. You could have someone who's ignorant, someone who's, sincere, someone who's, who hates you, someone who knows you in person, but they made this account to someone who's just messing with you, trying to prank you. It could be some, bot that's not even an actual person. So even if some people have their pictures or a name, sometimes if you don't know that person, don't assume anything about them that you don't know, because people can make that stuff up. I mean, if anyone can just take some random picture of a person online and make up a random name and make a profile, add a bunch of people, and people get friend requests, they accept more often than not. It might seem like they're a real person, but they can easily make up a fake account, and so don't assume anything about someone that you're interacting with online.
Yeah, there's so many different things you could think about in that regard. You could think about people who are trying to come across as scholars and they're knowledgeable when they don't know anything, and they're spreading all types of false information about the deen. Some of them might not even be Muslim. They're actually sitting there trying to spread improper understanding of the deen. Sometimes you'll have like a brand new Muslim who's talking about something, and people will assume, I guess, that they've been Muslim for 20 years and they're this and that, and they'll speak to them in a way that's completely inappropriate to speak to a new Muslim. So there's just so many different things that you could talk about. You could be talking to that person who you pray next to in the masjid, and you don't even realize it. And so there's so many different things about the online world, and knowing who you're talking to and assuming things about them.
And not all topics or conversations, that might be appropriate or the best place to have them, might not always be online. I mean, if it's something personal, if I'm having a personal, conversation with, a person specifically about a certain topic, online might not be the best place to have that conversation.
Right. Publicly, with a limited amount that you can even write, so on and so forth. So tip number 5, once you put something online, it is out of your hands. It is out there forever.
And that's something that people don't think about, the ramifications in the future. Things might come back and cause you issues in the future. You can't take it back. Once you put something, you can't take it back. Don't think that if you deleted something, that then it's gone. If you can't see it, it's gone. No, that's the illusion of control. And if we actually took the time and read those, terms and conditions that we just click yes, I agree or I accept to whenever we download an app or sign up for a website, we'd see, what we're actually signing up for. But I mean, practically speaking, those are made in a way between the legal jargon and the length, so to really discourage people from reading them. So I doubt most of us read them. But the reality of it is, a lot of the stuff we post online, once you post something online, it's gone. That's it. It's not yours really anymore. You don't have much control over it.
And we've seen things from 10 years ago come back to haunt celebrities. I remember I did a video about this a while back where somebody was supposed to host an award show or something, but they went through their Twitter, and other celebrities, they'll go through their Twitter, go back to 10, 15 years ago and say, oh, you said this. because once it's online, there it is. So you got to be very
it back.
careful about what you put on the internet. Tip number 6, consider legal liability.
People a lot of times don't think that whatever they post online has any legal ramifications. It could open the door to legal liability. Again, I mean, you don't know who you're interacting with, and whatever you're sending, who you're sending it to, and who you're receiving it from sometimes. So it could be could open the door to legal liability for you, cause you legal problems in real life. And again, even if you're anonymous, again, we said there's no one anonymous online, because everything can be tracked down to to your IP address and to who you really are. If the need is there. So that's something to keep in mind.
For sure. Tip number 7, when responding to someone, humanize them before replying.
You really want to think of the person. If you're responding to someone who said something, think about them as a human being before you respond to them. Don't think about just that comment or post or whatever it is that they had said, because they're a human being behind the other side of that screen that's going to receive that response from you. So think about it, and how what you say, how you're going to come off, all that. You don't want to just take the human part out of the online interactions, whereby because you don't see the person, you're not interacting with them face to face, then you respond in a way that you wouldn't have responded in person.
Yeah, and I think we underestimate too the effect that our words can have on people when we don't humanize them. Especially as somebody who is on YouTube. I mean, you get all types of crazy comments, and most of the time you can just brush it off. But there have been comments that people have said to me that have just really, they've upset me, and they've stuck with me, and they've hurt me, subhanAllah. So it's like, people need to realize that, like, you're talking to another human being, and you might think that they're not reading what you're saying, or that people are like they're not human, like they can just hear anything and it's not going to affect them. Like, no, subhanAllah, it does affect people.
Yeah, they might even dwell on it. It might be so depending on how they view it or read it. It might be keep them up all night. It might really cause them. So be mindful. I think one tip for that is, when you're responding to someone, think of, if you don't know them, you're responding to someone online, think of someone you do know. Assume that this person, this coworker, this neighbor, this friend, whoever said this. How would you respond to them? If you think about them, because they're someone you know, it's easier to think of the human aspect of that other person that you're responding to. So that might change your tone. You might not it might not change what you're saying to them in response. You might still hold your same view or what you're saying, but the whole tone might be different, and that might come across in a more positive way, and hopefully they might even bring you both closer on the same page rather than cause more issues.
Absolutely. So tip number 8, know that you could reach millions of people.
The potential for online interactions or just online things that we post is huge. And I think we're not fully mindful of that when we post stuff. We're just thinking, who's going to see, who's going to read it? I'm just, or maybe I'm just responding to one person, or there's only 3 people copied on that thread. But the reality of it is, it's public, it's online, anyone can access it. Even if it's not public, anyone can take a screenshot of it and post it online for it to be public. So even if it's a private email conversation or private, message, it really has the potential to reach a lot more people than when we think.
We've seen people who post something on Twitter or do something online, how a publication or somebody with a lot of followers, they will take a screenshot and it'll go viral and millions of people will see it. It'll be on the news. Then before you know it, they're like public enemy number 1. They lose their job, and that's it. I mean, you can never live some of this stuff down. SubhanAllah. So that brings us to tip number 9. Be mindful that the angels are recording everything.
I think it's important as Muslims to remember that on the day of judgment, we're going to be held accountable for everything, public or private, big or small, good or bad that we do. And so, when everything's being recorded, being mindful of that, you're going to be accountable for that. Everything you say, everything you do in person or online, if I'm mindful of that. If I think and reflect on the day of judgment, I'm going to stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's going to ask me about everything I said and I did, and I'm going to be held accountable for it. There's either a reward or punishment. Then I'm going to think twice maybe before saying certain things, or make sure whatever I say is good, or I'm going to remain silent. And that applies not just in person, but also in online.
It's pretty ironic because to not keep that in mind as you're typing things online, because if anything, it should give you a clearer picture that everything you're saying is being documented. You can go back on your Twitter, like we were talking about. You can go back on your email, on Facebook, you can go back years, and everything you wrote is sitting there.
Yeah, it should be more obvious that the things that you're posting is documented than the things that you say in person, because they're not being typed up.
Yeah.
But that's actually more of a reminder that hey, everything's being documented and written down and recorded and documented for.
But I think it plays into that idea that online is another thing, like it's a video game or something. Like, no, it's still real life, SubhanAllah. And that brings us to the last tip, number 10, be mindful of its impact on your in-person social interactions with people.
I think, and we see that sometimes with some of the students as well, they interact with each other online one way, but in person, they can't even hold a conversation with that same person that they might talk to, so much online. That same person, same topic, they can't have a in-person conversation. So being mindful of how the time you spend online, the interactions you have online impacts your own interactions with other people, socially when you're in person, and the negative impact that could have, because at the end of the day, you're going to leave your devices, your electronics, you're going to go interact with people in person. You can't marry someone, and just interact with them, online. You can't just, interact with your friends through text message. At some point, it's all gonna have to come down to in-person interactions. And so be mindful of how your online interactions are gonna impact your in-person social skills.
Yeah, and you develop certain habits, right? If you're acting a certain way online all the time, don't act like you're gonna just be able to switch that off. It's something that's going to take it's going to take root in your personality as well offline. So that does it for this episode. Let us know what you think in the comments. Until next time, Jazakumullahu khairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.